Hello, I'm Katie Poe Harbaugh with Standard Distribution Company. Protecting food from pests during transportation and storage is a critical part of food safety. In this session, we will focus on the common pests associated with the food distribution industry, including pests which may hitchhike in on shipments. Prevention and control methods will be reviewed with an emphasis on third-party audit compliance. On behalf of the IWLA Food Council, we are excited to offer the following webinar prepared for us by McLeod Pest Management Solutions, Patricia Hoddle. McLeod Pest Management has been a leader in pest control solutions since 1904. We hope you enjoy this informative session.
Hello and welcome to the webcast, Pests in the Food Distribution and Logistics Environment. My name is Pat Hoddle and I will be the presenter for this session. I'm the Technical Director for McLeod Services, a pest management firm based out of South Elgin, Illinois. In this program, I will discuss the reasons for controlling pests, the importance that the client plays in the pest management program. I'll cover different control techniques and some of the key pests for the warehousing industry. So why do we control pests? One of the main reasons from a food industry perspective is that they can transmit diseases. Pests like cockroaches, mice, and rats will harbor diseases like salmonella and carry it to food and food contact surfaces. In addition, some people are allergic to insects and rodents. The German cockroach is considered the most common trigger for asthma for inner city children. Mouse urine can also trigger asthmatic attacks in sensitive individuals. Along with foodborne illness and allergy concerns, there are diseases transmitted by blood-feeding insects, like the mosquitoes. West Nile virus would be an example of one of those diseases. One insect pest, the warehouse beetle, which is pictured here on the slide and is a stored product pest, has numerous hairs on their body. They're spear-shaped hairs, and when ingested in large quantities can cause intestinal distress, especially in the very young, the elderly, and those with compromised immune systems. This pest was responsible for a major recall of powdered milk infant formula about 2 years ago. Many of the insect pests we control can also be of medical concern due to bites and stings. More people die each year in the United States from bee and wasp stings than snake bites. This may be surprising, but not everyone likes bugs. I'm an entomologist. I happen to like insects. In some cultures, insects are eaten as part of the normal diet, but this practice is not generally well accepted in the United States. They're low in fat, high in protein, but still not commonly accepted here. Insects rank high on the list of public fears, and it's not surprising that some consumers would be alarmed by the presence of insects in their homes or in their food. They rank 3 in a list of 10 top fears, right behind public speaking and heights. Pests can ruin a food processor's reputation when pests are found in food. They can reduce the quality and in some cases affect the taste of the food. Flour beetles, for an example, or type of stored product pest that can impart an off flavor to food when those pests build up in sufficient numbers. Some pests like termites and the stored product pest, the Cadell beetle, can cause structural damage tunneling into wood. Termites will also attack paper products and food packaging. Regulatory compliance is another issue and concern. The Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act states that food cannot be contaminated or held in conditions where it may become contaminated. New rules under FSMA will require and emphasize additional preventative measures for pests. The Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act states that food is considered adulterated if contaminated with filth. Definition for filth includes insects, insect parts or excreta, rodent droppings or hair, bird feces or feathers, and other potentially harmful substances like microorganisms. Most of us are familiar with the Peanut Corporation of America food recall, which was the result of a salmonella outbreak, which resulted in that recall back in 2008. Worker reports from the plant involved in the recall. David James recalled opening a tote of peanuts at the processing plant in his small Georgia town and seeing baby mice in it. It was filthy and nasty all around the place, said James, who used to work in shipping at the plant. Terry Jones, a janitor, remembered the peanut oil left to soak into the floor and the unrepaired roof that constantly leaked rain. And James Griffin, a cook at the plant, recounted how his observations led to this simple rule. I never ate the peanut butter, and I wouldn't allow my kids to eat it. The stakes are high when we fail to control pests that results in regulatory action. This was the largest food recall in the U.S. 90 employees lost their jobs, 9 deaths, and multiple companies involved in product recalls. 3 employees of the plant, former employees, have been tried and convicted and are currently awaiting sentencing. Equally important in some regards to the regulatory compliance can be compliance with the third-party auditors. Failure to successfully pass these audits can mean loss of business. Moving into the control aspects, we'll focus on the non-chemical control strategies first. There are 3 basic needs for pest survival: food, water, and shelter. The more we can do to limit these resources for pests, the more successful our pest management. It doesn't take a whole lot of food to support insects. So as the slide indicates, 1 kernel of wheat can support 1 Indian meal moth larva. This is the immature stage of that moth. 3 red flower beetle larvae, or 21 flat grain beetle larvae. We have to think bug clean versus people clean as a result. Doesn't take a whole lot of food. We need to make sure that we are removing even what appear to be small spills of food or small food accumulation. So as pictured on the slide here, we have some pancake mix flour that has spilled underneath racking. And if you think about the size of an insect being, typical stored product pest insect being about 1/8 of an inch in length, the beetles that attack some of these stored products, that pile can support a lot of those beetles over a long period of time. Kind of similar to this man standing next to the pile of grain. That's a lot of product relative to the size of the pest. It's important to note that sanitation is pest management. Removal of food through good cleaning practices is essential to the pest management program. Hard to clean areas are the areas where the pests are going to be most commonly found. So when we have equipment that's poorly designed, where food is allowed to accumulate, as shown in this rack leg, more likely to have pests in those areas. So we want to start first by designing equipment, designing the facility properly to reduce those hard to clean areas, reduce those areas where material will accumulate, food material will accumulate. If we didn't start with a proper design, then we want to try to modify it to correct that issue. And if we can't modify that poor design, then find a way to clean it and place it on a regular schedule for cleaning to remove that food debris. Rack legs, appropriate for the warehousing industry, is an area particularly difficult to clean. Doesn't seem like there's a manufacturer out there of racking for warehousing that makes that base area easy to clean. Some of the components are more difficult and more poorly designed than others, but certainly the bases can be an area of problem. The pest management strategies used today are often referred to as IPM, or Integrated Pest Management, sometimes also called a green approach. It involves the use of multiple tools, multiple strategies to control pests. It can help reduce the need for pesticide through the incorporation of non-chemical tools as well as chemical tools. Tends to be more effective and more effective on a longer term as we use these non-chemical tools, and also reduces the potential for food contamination through the reduction in pesticide use. It's important as employers of staff to help educate and encourage employees to participate in the pest management program. So we request that employees report pest sightings. The average pest management professional that's hired to service a distribution center may only be there 2 hours, depending on the size of the facility, maybe more, but maybe 2 to 6 hours a week. Whereas the warehouse staff is there 8 hours on average, 8 hours a day. More opportunity, more numbers, more hours present on site to see pests. And so encouraging employees to report pests found. Most pest management firms will either have a log or a pest sighting memo book that can be used to record pests that have been observed by warehouse staff. Additional things that we ask employees to help with: reduction, again, of those basic needs for pests, food, water, and shelter. And then thirdly, to help exclude pests through the use of keeping doors closed when not in use and inspection of incoming goods. Delving into this a little further: elimination of food, cleaning up spills promptly, cleaning equipment and areas on the cleaning schedule, keeping dumpster areas and garbage receptacles cleaned and emptied on a regular basis, not just the liners but underneath the liners as well, repairing equipment that may be contributing to issues of product spillage or leaks, and looking for the hard to clean areas to make sure that those areas do get cleaned. Elimination of water, report and repair leaking pipes, faucets, roofs, and other water sources. If water is used to clean areas, the use of fans to help dry those floors, to limit the time, the amount of time that that water is allowed to sit there and be available for pests. And then considering drainage, both indoors and outdoors, making sure that floors are properly pitched so that water drains into floor drains, making sure that paved areas are kept in good repair on the outside of the structure, that we don't have potholes, areas where water can accumulate for birds, rodents, and insect pests. Elimination of areas of shelter for pests, sealing cracks and crevices. Many of the pests that we deal with, such as cockroaches, even the stored product pest, can have a tendency to harbor in cracks and crevices. Expansion joints would be an example in a warehouse floor. Not only does it provide an area of shelter where they may be undetected, but also can be an area where food products can accumulate and be difficult to clean. So sealing cracks and crevices to remove that harborage area. Reduction of clutter, and I've got a picture there of an area in a warehouse where old equipment, this was part of a processing plant as well, but old equipment had been stored there. And when we have a lot of clutter, it can be difficult to inspect those areas for pest activity. So the less clutter, the less area we have to inspect, the better it is for the pest management program. Keeping sanitation aisles open for inspection and service of equipment. The 18-inch sanitation aisle around the perimeter of the structure is typically where we place our equipment for monitoring rodents especially. We need to keep that area clean. Keeping pests out, keeping doors and windows closed when not in use. If a door needs to be open for ventilation purposes, then it should be screened. Inspection of incoming goods to look for pests, to make sure that when we bring in products into the warehouse, that we are not bringing pests along with those products. It's an area that, as I do my field inspections of facilities, I often see not being done to the extent that it should be. And so we place our facilities at risk of bringing in rodents and other pests. Sealing openings around utility lines, repairing door sweeps to prevent pest entry from the exterior. Many of the pests, and we'll get into some of those in a few minutes, are found outside, not just being brought in on incoming goods, but can be found outside. And so making sure that the building is tight and limiting the ability for these pests to get in, important. Educating employees not to bring pests in with them, either from the standpoint of going outside for a break and perhaps carrying insects back in with them when they return into the facility. Also bringing in pests from home on personal belongings such as lunches, backpacks, etc. Not at all uncommon for German cockroaches, for example, to be brought in by employees from home on personal belongings. We are also seeing, with the resurgence of bed bugs, the issue of bed bugs being brought into food plants, into warehouses by employees on personal belongings. Okay, moving into the pests. Top pests we're going to cover today: rats, cigarette beetles, warehouse beetles, housefly, birds, house mouse, and the Indian moth. First up, house mouse. Not very large an animal, only 6 inches long, weighing a half to 1 ounce in weight, so not extremely large. But where it does become a problem is in the amount of contamination it can cause due to things such as droppings. That's the fecal pellets that they produce. So on average, a house mouse, even though it's so small in size, can produce 50 to 100 droppings per day. That's a lot of potential contamination. In addition to the solid waste, 3,000 urine droplets produced per day by a mouse. Pictured here in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide, that whitish material is urine that is fluorescing on food packaging. So we've got urine contamination on that product as well as the solid droppings. Female can produce on average 8 litters per year with 6 young. So we say about 50 on average young per female. And as I mentioned earlier, contaminate food with their droppings and their urine. Far more significant potential for contamination than consumption of food. The other rodent pests that we deal with in the urban standpoint are the rats. There are two common rats in the United States that are structural pests. Those are the roof rat and the Norway rat. They share the two characteristics of being nocturnal, which means that they're more active at night, increases their survival because they're more active at the period of time when people are less apt to see them. They exhibit neophobic behavior, which means that they are very, very cautious around new objects. This also hinders us from the control standpoint in that if we put out rodent bait stations, if we put out traps for rats, they are much more cautious than the house mouse. House mouse tends to be investigative and will examine and check out new equipment. Rats, on the other hand, much more cautious around that equipment and therefore harder to control and trap and get to accept baits. Roof rat, more common in the upper areas. Roof rat is more common in the southeast and southwestern parts of the United States, although we will see it occasionally in the north. When we do see it, it tends to be along areas of commerce. So, for example, in Illinois, we will see it along the Illinois River or along the Mississippi, Davenport, Iowa, Peoria, Illinois, occasionally coming up on barges from the south. So, more common in the southern part of the United States, although it can be found in the north as well. It'll be more commonly, as the name suggests, roof rat, be found in the upper areas, the roofs, the attics of buildings. Norway rat, the other most common, the other common rodent in the U.S., tends to prefer ground level and tends to prefer a ground connection. So often nesting in the ground, nesting subslab underneath the structures, or outside in the soil and coming. Warehouse beetle, I mentioned this insect previously in one of the slides. Here I'm showing both the larva and what the adults look like. They can enter from the exterior, very, very common for them to be outside and come inside from the outside, as well as they can be brought in on products. Prefer high protein foods. Mentioned the recall of the powdered milk. Pet food is another common food item they'll attack, but it'll feed on any grain material. Life cycle completion from egg to adult, 40 to 50 days. They are light attracted and can fly. We will see these in our insect light traps. Indian meal moth, one of the stored product pest moths. Female can produce 100 to 400 eggs in her lifetime. The larva, or the immature stage, is the destructive stage. It's the one that does the feeding and will be found in the food. The adults do not feed at all. The larva will wander from the food source, so they're living in the food that they're infesting. But when they go to change to the next stage, that pupal stage, they'll often wander from that food source into cracks and crevices, into shelving, into rack supports, to spend and to pupate into that next stage. Types of foods infested include pet food. Birdseed is probably one of the most common sources for Indian meal moth, but a wide range of other foods as well. Raisins, dried fruit, grain products, nuts, beans, candy, crackers, spices, and processed food. It is the #1 stored product pest in the United States. Cigarette beetle, another one of our stored product pests. As its name suggests, it will attack tobacco. But in addition to tobacco, it will feed on a wide variety of materials, and often materials that contain more than one ingredient. So not just flour, but cake mix that would have spices in addition to the flour. And just as it will feed on tobacco, often associated with dried herbs. Can come in from the exterior, so again, can be brought into a facility on goods that are brought in through the dock doors, but can also be found outside. We see this beetle quite a bit in areas where tobacco is grown and associated with tobacco barns, and being outside for that reason. Life cycle can be completed in 30 to 40 days. It is reddish brown in color and ranging in size, this is the adults, ranging in size from 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch. Also characteristic of this beetle are these holes that it'll produce, these shot hole type holes in packaging as the beetles emerge from the product they're infesting. Birds, there are three main pest bird species in the United States: the pigeon, English house sparrow, and European starling. These birds can be controlled using lethal methods without permits. There are some pest bird species such as barn swallows, gulls, Canada geese that cannot be controlled using lethal methods without permits. Pest birds can contribute to foodborne illness issues through their droppings in particular. Histoplasmosis is a fungal disease that is associated with birds. It's a fungus that can be found in soil. Adding droppings when areas are infested with birds to that soil can help with the spread of the disease. It'll affect the lungs in humans, and as the spores of the fungus get disturbed when droppings are removed. Birds can also be responsible for fires, the droppings. Dropping accumulations can catch on fire, as well as nesting material. We serviced a refinery in Illinois many years ago that had a problem with European starlings. And European starlings will come into facilities like refineries, chemical plants in the winter months for heat. Large accumulations of those droppings in this situation occurred and caught on fire, and I don't need to explain how serious a fire can be in an oil refinery. Filth flies, like the housefly, particularly problematic because of the fact that they can fly long distances, can come from areas out of the control of the pest management company and the warehouse. About 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch in length, 4 dark stripes along the back that you can see behind the head there. Egg to adult, extremely short period of time, averaging 6 days under favorable conditions, so we can build up large populations of flies in a short amount of time. Can carry over 100 different diseases, including the foodborne illnesses. One of the reasons that I find this pest particularly disturbing is the fact that they have what we call sponging mouthparts, which means that they can only pick up food that is in a liquid form. If you think about a sponge, it picks up liquids. So in order for filth flies, house flies, to feed on solid foods, they have to regurgitate on that food to soften it and make it such that they can then soak it up with those sponging mouth parts. So when a fly lands on food, it is vomiting in order to digest that food. And as it takes up food, it needs to make room in its digestive tract and so it is also excreting at the same time. So it'll vomit and excrete on your food. It'll breed in feces, garbage, and human food, and again, fly long distances. So when these flies land on food that people are eating, we don't know where it's been before, and so it's particularly disgusting to think about where that fly, it could have been in a latrine or a porta potty and then landing on your stand that you're eating outside. I've got pictures here of the tools that are commonly used for monitoring and control in warehousing. So in the upper left-hand corner, we have an interior rodent trap. This is called a multi-catch trap that's used to control and monitor for rodents, house mouse in particular, and placed typically around the perimeter of the structure. Center picture is of an insect light trap, and these are used again for monitoring flying insects, including stored product pests. Many of the stored product pests, like cigarette beetle, like warehouse beetle, and to a lesser extent Indian meal moth, are attracted to lights, and so we'll find those in these light traps. And then in the upper right hand corner we have pheromone trap that are used for monitoring the stored product pests, such as warehouse beetle, Indian meal moth, cigarette beetle. These traps are glue-based and contain pheromones that attract the insect to the trap. Pheromones are chemicals used for communication, species specific, and those are added to the traps and used to monitor for levels of those pests in the facility. Documentation and communication is a critical component of any pest management program, and the details and the thoroughness and the accuracy of the documentation is critical to the success of the program as well as for auditor compliance.
Thank you for engaging in part 2 of the Food Council's webinar series. We hope this webinar has provided you with the necessary tools and education to apply to your everyday practices. We are excited for you to join us in part 3 on allergens, which will be available soon.